Hey everyone, this is Heather and Jenny with Surviving Darkness, and this is episode 3. We have covered the first week, episode 1, we covered actually just like a generalization of everything that we were going to cover in our podcast. And then week 2, episode 2, I guess I should say, was about generational curses and the things that have been passed down from through our family that have caused issues throughout the family. So today we're going to tackle the topic of control.
And we're going to start off with fear. This is one of the tactics, actually probably the biggest tactic that the demonic presence in our house used to be able to get us to do pretty much whatever it wanted, whenever it wanted. So some of the things that it would do to cause us to be afraid is just moving furniture around. Like I had said last week or the week before, I'm not sure which one, but I had walked into our dining room and the chairs, all the dining room chairs were like stacked up on each other like a pyramid. And there hadn't been anyone in the dining room to have done that.
These were things that led up to actually starting to make us be more afraid in order to make us more vulnerable to the things that were going to happen, I guess you'd say.
Right, the lead up.
Yes.
It was its way, I guess, with child predators, we would sort of call this grooming.
Right.
The demonic force in the house was grooming us and preparing us for the things that it had in store for us later on. So it had to start off like trying to get the control that it needed by scaring us into submission. So not only did it do the chairs, but we would see red glowing eyes throughout the house, mainly in that dining room. That dining room was very active. And I don't know if it was just so dark that everything just showed up in there. But it was an active room. There were nights that I would turn the TV off and it would just come right back on. And that was scary in itself when you're a kid and you turn the TV off and it comes on and there's no one else in the room. So, no one else turned it on for you.
And you didn't have remotes then.
No, we were the remotes.
Yeah. It wasn't like you sat on it or something like that. You had to literally push the button or,
Right.
So.
And we would just be like watching TV or something. And then one of the animals would get knocked off the back of the couch. And I would get woke up in the middle of the night with knives stuck in my headboard. And I don't know if the noise or what exactly woke me up, but I woke up with a knife like right above my head in the headboard of the bed. There were times that it would come to the doorway and tell me to go wake up, Dad. Mm-hmm. And the voice that it had was very, very distinct. You knew the difference between a human voice and a demonic voice. And it would use terms that weren't even the kind of language that we use now. It's sort of like biblical times. And it would sometimes look at us and say, what's the word I'm trying to find?
Yes.
And because it knew that we wouldn't understand the language that it was using. So that was some other things that it would use. I would go upstairs to the bedroom and there would be stuffed animals that were positioned on the bed, like in sexual positions. I would have blood on my mirror, messages written in the blood. And the attic door would usually be down. There were times that I would walk upstairs and I had like a black and white clown and it would be hanging in the closet. We didn't have closet doors. We just had like the closet frame. And it would be hanging like in the door frame with a belt around its neck and a hatchet holding it in place. We both had like the hatchet in our bed. When we would go to bed, there would be a hatchet just laying in the bed or under our pillow or somewhere. And then whenever we would go somewhere, I would try to get in the house first because all of my pictures would be turned upside down and they would have blood on them. And it was a horrible, putrid smelling blood. It just wasn't wasn't normal. And it just had a horrible, like a rotten odor to it. We were also, this was sort of later on. We would have to record the acts that were going on. And those were used as like a blackmail. And then there was Polaroid pictures, never anything that you would have to send to have developed. And those were used that it was going to like put them all through town and stuff like that in order to just keep us submissive and just to control everything about us. It was a constant fear of, I'm going to let everybody see these, or everybody's going to know what all you've done. And it wasn't even anything that we wanted to do. So not only were we forced to do stuff that we didn't want to do, that was humiliating in itself, but then we had the threat of, oh, I'm going to have everybody see what you have done. And they're never going to believe that some kind of demonic force made you do it, because they're not going to believe anything like that.
And we weren't anything like that.
Right.
Like, we were very private about things, period. Just, when we, I guess you'd say, we're not promiscuous, nothing like that at all. So kind of stuck to the rules, I guess you'd say, and so anything like that was going to happen was extremely intimidating to us, because it just, we weren't normally like that.
That's why so much fear was required. So much was required to scare us into doing what it wanted us to do, because we didn't want to do it. We fought tooth and nail over every little thing. And one time, I don't remember what the fight was over. I couldn't even tell you what the circumstances were, but I remember riding down this road, and it was like a 1-lane dirt road. And my dad was telling me that I needed to do something, and I didn't want to. And that demonic thing sort of took over him. So it started flying down this 1-lane road that has trees on both sides of the street. And it's dictating to me every little thing it wants me to do, and telling me that if I don't do it, it's going to kill me. So it's making me say, yes, I will do that. Yes, I will do that, because I knew that it was just going to hit a tree. It was going to do something. And then even riding out there, I didn't know if it had someone else in the woods.
Right.
So I'm alone pretty much, because I can't get my dad, even though I'm like hollering at him, trying to get him to fight whatever this thing is that took over him. He just wasn't coming back at that point. And then finally, after I agreed, I will do whatever, just whatever, it let my dad come back. And he didn't know that anything had happened. It was like, almost like he went to sleep for however long. And then he comes to, and he's like, what's going on? And I'm hysterical, because something else is driving the vehicle, flying down this dirt road, this 1-lane road. And I'm like, I don't even know if this thing can see.
Right.
I mean, I don't know if this thing can even see where we're going. And it's talking to me, so it's not paying attention to the road. So, I mean, I was just scared to death that night. I just knew I wasn't going to make it back home.
And that was another way, actually, that it would take control, is, it would take over Dad, and it would be so different, like you said, that we knew that there was something, it wasn't Dad.
No.
Yet at the same time, when it first started, especially like with me, I'm sure you felt the same way, I don't know, but when everything first started with me, things would happen and it would have me doubting, well, are you sure that that's not your dad? Are you sure that that's not him? Know, and maybe I didn't see what I thought I saw. Maybe it was just him acting like this or whatever, to kind of put that cloud of suspicion in there,
And the fact that it's your dad.
Mm-hmm.
He's supposed to be like the protector of the home. He's supposed to be the one who can beat down anybody, and it's controlling him.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't feel like you have anyone that can protect you at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. He would talk about he was scared of that entity also. So he was compliant with a lot of things that it wanted.
Yeah.
So it was very hard to just distinguish between what was being enforced and what was a precautionary measure.
Yeah.
So we pretty much stayed in that fight or flight constantly. It was a constant battle.
Because there were things, said, well, if you go ahead and do this, today, then it says it'll leave you alone tonight, And so you were like, okay, well, by that point, we had already been used to being sleep deprived, and you wanted your sleep. It was like there was numerous nights, we talked about this the other day, that you would not go to sleep until 2:00 in the morning, and your alarm would go off for school at 5:00, Yeah,
that was another thing that we were talking about, control, how it controlled us. It kept us so tired because we had like not hardly any sleep at all. And then we were going to school, and only God himself had to have been with us in order for us to have graduated even with honors, or to have even graduated from school.
And not just slept or the whole day, or just dropped out, period, and gone somewhere else. So,
right.
Yeah.
Now, what was the thing, like the first things that it started doing with you? Because it started with me before it did you.
Yes.
It was
several years.
Yeah. And at a different house.
Mm-hmm.
So when we moved, it actually followed us.
Yes.
And I don't know if it used Dad. I know the Ouija board is what pretty much opened the realm to the demonic, because things weren't as crazy.
It was more like ghostly than, whenever we first started dealing with it.
So it's hard to tell exactly how many entities were actually in that home.
Right.
But, anyway.
So in the first house, nothing happened.
Nothing happened with you.
Yes.
And that's where stuff started with me. And that's where all the things upstairs in that house happened with me.
And of course, like I would see, like ghost stuff. Like I said, I joked,
Well,
and
you
said
saw
that
the flannel shirt guy with the red eyes coming up the steps.
Yes. My cousin and I had seen the man at the bottom of the steps. And so I'd seen that. And then I joked one day and said that it actually like helped me clean my room. Heather and Mom were downstairs in the kitchen, and it was only me upstairs. And I used to, play school and all this other stuff. So I had books along the banister and was writing on the chalkboard, but I was also cleaning my room at the same time. And so I had swept my room and had a pile, and I had to walk downstairs to get the dustpan. But when I got back upstairs, all of the books that I had on the banister playing were back in my bookshelf. And everything was like wiped off on my chalkboard. And there was nobody else in the house that could have done that, because I walked downstairs to the kitchen. Heather and Mom were there, and there was nobody else there, So we kind of laughed about that stuff, because that was more of like a ghostly presence, I guess you'd say. Or like when it would walk up the stairs, and it wasn't, walk up the stairs and stand at the end. It wasn't so
aggressive.
Yeah, it was just there,
Aggressive and controlling. And
so, I saw that stuff, and yeah, of course it scared me because I was young, and there's a 5-year difference between you and I, close to 5 years. And so things like that scared me. But when we moved from that house across town, that was when everything actually really started to get more aggressive and with me. And I was actually, the first night that I knew that something was different, I was laying in bed, and it was summertime, and I had my window open, and it woke me up because I heard like 15, 20 voices outside of my room. Like you would have thought that there was a whole congregation of people out there just talking, different conversations going on. scared me to death. I had my window open, so I got up and walked into the living room where Dad was and told him what was going on. Of course, he went outside and looked around and everything, and I I was scared, but I kind of glanced out the window a little bit while he was looking around. I didn't look very long, but he came back in and he said, "There's nothing there. There's nobody there. There's nothing there." And that's when he told me, well, like you said, we called it. And so whatever it was, and that's what he said, whatever it was that was at the other house has followed us here. And now it's trying to get your attention.
I don't know if where he made the Ouija board, if that's why it controlled him so much.
Maybe.
He didn't use it.
No.
But he made it for us. Mm-hmm. And I guess maybe because of the fact that he wrote it all out, he was the one who masterminded the whole thing and decided, we'll use this shot glass or whatever. You all can use that. And
it could have already started getting a hold of him. And maybe that's what
made him decide to do the Ouija board. Who knows?
Yeah.
All I know is after the Ouija board was when everything went crazy.
Yeah.
And when we tried to leave that house, it wasn't going to let him go. There was almost like a clear door. I couldn't see it. And I would have thought that he was exaggerating or making stuff up. But when he tried to walk out the door, his face was smashed up against this wall that I couldn't see. And then he said, "Try reaching in." So for some reason, I was able to reach in, grab his hand, and he was able to come through it. But when he was trying to come through it on his own, he couldn't get out of that house. It did not want him leaving that house. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if maybe with it being a demonic presence, it was going to have to gain a lot of power to go with us. But if it was already in him or whatever, it
had enough of an attachment to be able to have the strength to go with us and follow us.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or to keep him. I think it's sort of like they have to need a host.
Mm-hmm.
So without him there, it wasn't as strong because it would have to get the power to be able to go.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is what the deal was, but it did not want him leaving that home.
Mm-hmm. Well, evidently it had enough power because it ended up moving. So we had it in the first house, and then it was in 3 other houses. So 4 altogether.
Mm-hmm.
4 houses altogether is where it was. Because we had the 2-story house, the one out the road, and then the 2 right now.
Right.
Yeah, so there were 4 altogether.
Right.
That it was.
With you.
Yes, with me. Mm-hmm.
Because it's followed me.
Yes.
To the other houses after I got married and moved on.
Yeah.
It wasn't as strong and didn't do as much stuff at that point as what it did in those other houses.
Mm-hmm.
But it tried to make its presence known every now and then.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a battle. It's been a battle for years, but I don't let it get to me like it used to. I don't let it control me. I don't have that fear. It attacks more at night when I'm sleeping, when it tries to catch me off guard because it knows that I'm going to fight if I'm awake.
Right.
So, but anyway, I just went off on a tangent, but.
Oh, that's fine.
What other things?
So, like, the one night, I was actually able to see it in that house. And this, like I said, it was this was the first summer that everything started with me. And I was about 12 years old when everything really started to come to a head with me. And that's when it got bad. And so I was in the living room and I was laying on the couch, and I don't remember at that point what I saw at first, but I remember the voice saying, "Cover your head up with the sheet and count to 10. And then after you've counted to 10, then you can uncover your head and look." So, when you're terrified, you count faster or whatever too, And so I counted to what I thought was 10. And then I pulled the covers off of my head. And as I pulled the covers off of my head, I saw what I say was like a cloaked figure, because it was in a black cloak, not like, it didn't have like a collar on it. It was just a hood that had hung down in the back with, like a long cloak, floor length cloak. And then it didn't walk. It just hovered and went from the living room into the kitchen. And to see something like that, and that's not a person, because a person cannot make that movement. They would literally have to have been on, like a hoverboard, and those things were not made at that time.
They were not.
For it to be able to move across,
it's like it
with
was levitating.
Ease. Yes, literally and with ease, and there was no. And to see it just from the back and just feel nothing but darkness and fear. That was what
you could feel.
The whole atmosphere changed.
Before it would even come in the room,
yes.
You could feel that it was coming.
Yes.
I would just lay there, just still as can be, but I knew it was coming. I could feel it coming.
And it would, say something like, even during the day through Dad, it may just be something 10 seconds long, but just say, like, you will be ready for tonight, or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, just, or this is going to happen tonight. And then there was nothing. Just so you knew all day, you had to think about that mentally, that something was going to happen. Or, even if Dad would say, well, it's come in and it's talked to me today, and this is what's going to happen, so you always had that in your mind that, okay, well, you know what? When you get home from school tomorrow, or whatever, then this is what you have to be prepared for. Right. Or, when you got home from school and it said, this is what's going on, then you had to dread that the whole entire evening. So you had anxiety, fear, right. Everything all day. So it controlled everything like that also.
Right.
So.
And it wasn't always like violence, but there was one time that it was on top of me, choking me. Mm-hmm. And it was trying to be like smart alecky. And it was like, where's your God now? As it's trying to choke the life out of me. And I was able to whisper out, he's right here. And that thing got so mad. I mean, it growled, went out of the room, and you could sort of hear like a chain rattling when it left. And it left me alone for probably a good 4 or 5 days. And supposedly got in trouble because it wasn't supposed to hurt me. Evidently it didn't have permission. I don't know how that works, but right. Evidently it didn't have permission. Mm-hmm. So it would try even things like that, and you never knew. Is it going to choke me? What's it going to do next if I don't do what it wants me to do? It was constant fear.
Yes. And I had, Heather and I were talking about things the other night to try to get, like an outline or whatever you want to say for this episode today. And we were talking about different things, that led up to the actual acts, I guess you'd say, of what happened. And I realized then that evidently there's been several things that I had, blocked out just because
it was overwhelming to think about.
Yes. And so you're at a different point than I am. You've mm-hmm. talked about this a lot longer than I have. And so as we're talking about this stuff with each other, it's like the same things are being said, but it's just like with my cousin, with the figure. We've never talked about this stuff, period, together with each other. But when we say it, like, you can finish what I've said happened because the same thing happened to you. Right. Yet at the same time, it did totally different things to you than it did to me. It was like it knew what buttons to push with each of us. Yes. What would get to each of us right. more.
Right.
And I had forgotten about like being held down until we had somebody speak about that. And I was like, yes, because you said that wasn't me in that room. Somebody, that happened to somebody else. And was like, yeah, it was me, absolutely, and it was strange because I'd never said that. I hadn't even started talking to anybody about this stuff whenever that came out. And so, just, and that's what I mean by the different things that it did to control,
And it was a lot of mind games.
Yes.
Like, I would be so tired and I would want to go to bed. And I would be like almost in tears. I'm like, I'm tired. I haven't slept in nights and I have to get up. I have to go to school. I have tests tomorrow. I'm tired. I just want some sleep. Can I just have one night of sleep? Mm-hmm. And it would be smart alecky and be like, tell dad or whatever to tell me, yeah, you can go to bed. And I go in there, and as soon as I step into my room and get near the bed, my dad comes busting through the doorway and he was like, don't you get in there. And I look on the bed and there's something in my bed. It's like it's covered with covers, but he was like, you got to get out of there. It's going to hurt you. So it was like, oh yeah, sure. You can go to bed. But then when you get in there, you can go to bed, but I'm going to hurt you if you do.
Yes.
So it was a lot of mind games.
And you had asked too, like what had led up, or when it started with me. Mm-hmm. And I had, I just happened to think about the one time that it was in the kitchen. And this is the first time that I actually was able to physically see it in my dad's body and take over my dad.
That's where we're different too. I never really saw it in its form, mm-hmm. with the cloak, anything like that. I always encountered it using dad.
Mm-hmm. Now whenever I saw it, we were literally about 6 feet apart, and dad was talking to me, and then it started with its voice, like it did, changed its voice, but it was still dad standing in front of me talking to me, but it was in the other voice. And then immediately, right in front of me, I watched its eyes, the whole entire thing turn black. There was no way that he didn't leave the room and come back and he did not do something, go somewhere, do something, and then come back and look that way. It happened directly in front of me.
It was always like when it would take over or whatever, it was always like he did a little shudder, and then it would be like a and then it would start talking. But it was always like this little shudder, and his eyes would sort of roll up in his head, and it would be like a that, a low growl, mm-hmm. and then it would start talking. So I would just like freeze, because I knew it's here.
And then it would leave that fast. He would have the shudder and it would be gone. And he would kind of
come to and look at us like, why are y'all, what's wrong? What happened? Y'all look scared. What happened?
Yes. And that was hard because there were times when you were like, don't act like that. Exactly.
Right.
But then you really don't know.
No.
Because
we will never really know.
No.
And he's gone now. And I just hold on to the fact that God knew. Mm-hmm. God knew what he done and what he wasn't in control of.
Mm-hmm.
So we all have to answer for everything that we've done. And I just have to hold on to that, because there's days that I'm so angry and I have to remind myself, you forgave him. And it's not so much forgiveness for him, but forgiveness for myself. Because that anger and bitterness that you carry around just makes you sicker, and it hurts me more than what it would hurt anyone else. So I've had to learn to forgive even if they don't ask for it. And that's with a lot of people. I've just learned to forgive, because otherwise that it's just going to eat me up inside. So those are two ways we've talked about: fear and the sleep deprivation. Mm-hmm. Was there any more you wanted added to like the sleep deprivation, or are we pretty well good with that?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
The other technique that it used was isolation.
For control. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for the control. It used the fear, the sleep deprivation, isolation. we weren't allowed to talk to anyone about anything that was going on. And I've told Jenny, like after I found out what all had happened to her, that for years I resented her because I was being told that I was going through everything to protect her and that nothing was happening with her. I did not know that the nights that I was actually being allowed to sleep, that it was in there bothering you.
Yeah.
So I would be like, why in the world is she in her room all pouty, staying in there like she's depressed and everything else when there is nothing going on with her? I just could not understand why you were acting like a brat.
Yeah.
But I did not know that anything was going on with you. And I think that when I found out, that's why I was so angry, because I thought I'm doing all this stuff to protect her. And then I found out that I wasn't protecting you at all. So I went through hell, literally, to protect you from the hell I was going through. And you were going through it too. So it wouldn't let us communicate.
Right.
And Mom was going through her own hell too. And we didn't know that she was going through anything. So it kept us all separated and at odds, because it didn't want us to be able to talk and say, this is what I'm doing. This is what's happening with me. This is what's happening with me.
And a lot of times with me, you know, we've talked about this too, that, you know, when something was going to happen with you, Dad would say, well, why don't you go in there and sleep with your mom tonight? You know, and this was even before anything ever happened to me in the first house.
Right.
You know, you go on in there and sleep with your mom. Well, you know, I didn't think anything of it. I, you know, was younger than you and, you know, cool, I get to go sleep with my mom and feel safe in a haunted house, you know. Well, I had no idea that, you know, when things were going on with you at all during that time, you know. And then there were other times, even later on, after things had started with me, it was still, well, you can go ahead and lay in there with your mom. You know, it'll be fine. You just go on in there and lay with your mom. And I still never thought anything about it at that time. It was later on that something happened that made me realize that you were probably going through the same thing that I was. And we've just now, in the past 3 years or so, started we're opening up to family members about more of what has happened with us. And, you know, they're like, well, why did your mom not say anything? Why did your mom not do anything? Well, she was going through everything we did and then some. Because there were multiple things that she had gone through that we had no idea about, none whatsoever. We just thought it was Heather and I going through it. And she lived just the same hell as we did, if not worse.
Right.
Because of the fact that he was her spouse and the mind games and everything like that. And so we've also said that if it was God's plan for things to have come out sooner, then they would have. And she would have figured it out, or someone would have, you know, figured it out or whatever. But that wasn't God's plan.
And anytime we would try to talk to someone or just talk about anything that was going on in that house, things got worse.
Yes.
They got uglier. There was more activity, more fear instilled in us. And one time I had actually talked to a neighbor and tried to get some help. And this was before all of the major sexual assaults and however you want to say it, were happening. And I was told that it was something in the house and that I would be yanked out of the house and put into foster care. I would never see my mom. I would never see my dad. I would never see my sister. I would be all alone, and I'd be put in a house where they didn't care nothing about me and everything else that I needed to tell them that I had made it up. Well, being 13 years old, I listened and did what I was told. But by doing that, there were people who thought that, you know, she'll make stuff up about you. So I felt like the rest of my life, like teenage years, people sort of kept me at a distance.
Right.
Because she might say something happened when it didn't happen.
Right.
And that really affected me.
And when you had reached out for help, I was young. Nothing had ever happened to me. I had no idea about anything. And so when I was questioned about it, I remember being questioned about it with the social worker or whoever it was that came to the house. But at that time, I was like, nothing's ever happened to me. I remember being asked if I had been, you know, touched or anything like that. And I was like, no, like, it was crazy because I'd never known anything about that. But then when I reached out to a friend, it was before, like exactly like you said, before things had gotten at their worst. It was the inappropriate touching and things like that. And I remember saying, he has a wife. I do not need for him to be doing this to me. You know, touch your wife. Don't touch me.
Right.
And so my friend had told her dad, well, I guess this goes back to if it was meant to come out, it would have come out, because he didn't go and talk to anybody like at the police station or anything like that. He confronted my dad with it. And my dad was like, oh, she's just mad over something, you know, over because I won't let her talk to this guy or whatever. And that's the reason that she's making all of this up. And so you had issues where, you know, no one could believe you anymore or whatever. So you were done saying anything to anybody. At that point, I had said something to try to get help, and it came right back to me that I was just saying something. And so I was done too. It was like, okay, done. Not saying anything to anybody else.
I would hope that the system's changed a lot now compared to how it was then, because I had the responsibility of telling my mom and dad that I had contacted protective services and that we had to go meet with a doctor on such and such day.
Oh, I didn't know the part.
Yes. So I was the one who had to tell them, you know, I talked to them and we've got to meet with this doctor this time, this day. And they were able to say, you know, this, you can't go in and say that because, you know, it didn't really happen. It wasn't really your dad. It was whatever's in this house. And scare me into going in and saying it didn't happen. So I would hope that that's not how things are now. But this was like in the 80s, I would say.
Mm-hmm. It was.
So, yeah, that was, I felt like, what good is it to try to get help when they're just going to leave you in that situation?
And I guess with that being said, this is kind of what, there's, you know, several reasons that we're doing this podcast. For one, it's almost like therapy for us. We're able to actually start talking about things that happen to us. And just Heather has been, like I said, at a different point than I am. She's talked about this a little bit more and is a little more open about it. I'm getting there. The past, I guess I'd say 1.5, 2 years, I've started kind of opening up about things to her and then to my husband. But also, like we've said 1,000 times, if there's anybody else out there in this situation that listens to this and says, well, there's nobody that's going to listen to me. If, you know, this is going on, there's nobody that's going to listen to me. And, you know, who am I going to talk to? Or nobody's going to believe me. Things are different now than when they were with us. And there are people that will help and will listen to you. And, you know, even if it's us, just email us or reach out to us or whatever, and we can help with that. And that's another reason that we were doing this podcast, is just to hopefully reach somebody and help them, even if it's just one person, just to be able to say, we understand, so.
I think because of that isolation and that sort of rejection that I had at that younger age, I think that plays a big part in why I'm not affectionate.
Right.
It's like I have a hard time getting close enough to someone to even let them give me a hug. It takes a lot, and I am getting better at that.
Yes.
I hug now instead of just patting you on your back as you're hugging me. I am getting a little better with that. It was usually just a little tap, tap, tap on the back. Okay, we're done. Go on.
Yes.
I am getting a little better, but it was hard. And also, Mom not being an affectionate person, she wasn't raised in an affectionate household. So she wasn't an I love you, giving you a hug type of person. She didn't hug me and tell me she loved me until I was 18. I knew she loved me. I mean, she took care of us. She fed us. She was there as much as she possibly could be without fighting her own battles and having to deal with the fights between her and Dad. So, I mean, she was there for us. So I knew she loved us, but it was good to actually hear her say, I love you, and to actually hug me. So that has been hard for me to get to the point that I'm able to say I love you and to hug you. And I may have even been just a little bit overly I love you and stuff like that. I don't know. When the boys were younger, I never wanted them to wonder if I cared. So I don't know of a time that I've never told them I love you. I've always, from the time they were little, I have told them I love you. I don't want them to ever feel the way I did. Does anybody even really care?
Right.
And you were more, you're going to hug me.
Yes.
Even as like a kid and a teenager, you needed that validation. You needed those hugs, and you would hug them until they hugged you back. They were going to hug you.
Yes.
And me, I was more of the reserved, quiet, just let me like fade into the background.
And it shows how differently we dealt with things too, with the drawbacks of what happened. You were absolutely, don't touch me, don't hug me, I don't want to have anything to do with you.
You're in my personal space and you're making me uncomfortable.
Yes, because of the things that had happened. I've always been affectionate, like you said, always. But at the same time, I completely compartmentalized things in my brain. Mine, no one would have ever known about anything with me. Even you had other things not come out in our family about 2008, somewhere along in there. There was several things that came out during that time, and we have still found out things with, like we said, the generational curses, friends of the family who were close friends of the family. And then just in the last year, we found out some very sickening things about those people too. And just that they were allowed to be around us and like drawn into our family. And so anyway, going back to what I was saying, the hugging and saying I love you and everything like that was never affected with me, because in my mind, all the other stuff that had happened was like back in another drawer, kind of away from everything else. And so since I never brought it up and I never talked about it, only I knew about it and nobody else would know about it, if that makes sense.
My feelings were more put into poetry
mm-hmm.
and talking to God.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to God a lot. I mean, pretty much my whole life.
Mm-hmm. And
that's what got me through, is I couldn't talk to anybody, but I could talk to God. I'd be like, God, why? Why is this still going on? And now I look back, I mean, we couldn't help anybody else. We couldn't say, I understand where you're coming from, if we had never dealt with anything.
Right. Yes. And there is a reason that people go through things.
And we've gotten a strength from God that is just beyond amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Because of what we've gone through. Jealousy was another thing. Jealousy in the interrogations with every single conversation that we had with anybody. I couldn't even like go anywhere with my friends and just have a normal, what I would consider a normal time. Because when I came back, it was, oh, what did you say? What all did you say? You should have said this and you shouldn't have said that. And it was like, I felt like I was in trouble for talking. Even just having a generalized conversation. Everything was so critiqued. And we weren't really allowed to date. We weren't allowed anything like that because of jealousy. I mean, it was like...
It was a competition.
It was a competition with everything. Even just having friends was a competition.
I had some girlfriends, but a lot of mine were guy friends, and that's all they ever were friends. And because of the circumstances, my dad was so jealous, so extremely controlling about all of that. And I had a friend, I was home by myself, and he brought lunch to me one day, and it literally did not even come into the house. I met him on the porch. That was it. He handed me lunch. We talked, and then I went in the house and ate, and when Mom and Dad came home, oh my goodness.
World War III.
It was like I had already let him in. I had done all kinds of stuff, and it was not even like that. It never was like that. And even when we thought we were doing exactly what we were told we could do, following exactly how, when we actually were supposed to be allowed to talk to guys or whatever, when we followed what we were supposed to do, we would still get in trouble because of the jealousy and the control.
And they were never good enough.
No.
There was something wrong with everybody.
Yes.
You can't talk to him anymore because something's stupid.
And then, we were talking about isolation. And I just was thinking about this too. And I'm sure it happened to you also. But even if we had a friend that was going to come stay the night and we had worked everything out to where they were supposed to come stay, if something... How do I explain it? There would almost be a consequence for that person coming to stay.
Right.
It was, well, this thing had something planned for you tonight. And since you decided to have somebody over here to stay and this couldn't happen, things are going to be 2 times worse for you tomorrow night. So just be prepared for that because that's how it's going to be.
Right.
And, so we didn't have any normal part of growing up. Teenage years, going to dances, things like that, because it was always, well, there's an ulterior motive.
Right.
Like
I didn't go to either one of my proms. And a lot of that was, I was just so backwards. I didn't want to talk to anybody. And I don't know if it was just because of the repercussions of talking to anybody or if I was just so beat down. I didn't think I was worthy of having a date for the prom.
And it was so different because, like you said before, you hated me and, kind of like just resented me because you had no idea that things were going on like they were with me because I tried to let everything be normal. I had friends. Nobody would have ever known. And that's the way I would have kept it because I didn't want to acknowledge what had happened.
Well, we lived 2 lives.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we did. Yes.
We lived 2 lives because there was the outside world life where everything was perfect. We were into sports. We excelled at that stuff. We had good grades. We had our mom and dad. Everything was just beautiful. Our dad was like very protective, and strict, but he did that because he cared about us. And
everybody loved him, because they didn't live with him.
Right. So it was as if we lived 2 separate lives. There was the life outside of the walls. And that could be why I can't stand fake. I can't deal with fake. I don't want fake around me. I don't want a fake life. I don't want anything fake. I want to keep things real because things were so fake for so long. And it was like I was two different people.
Yes.
There was the outside of the home Heather that had it all together. And then there was the inside of the home Heather that didn't have anything together and was just...
And had no control over anything whatsoever.
No.
None.
No control.
We weren't allowed to have any control over anything.
Everything scrutinized, didn't know what to say to anybody, what to think. We weren't allowed to think for ourselves. We couldn't even decide what we wanted to wear for the day.
I was just getting ready to say, even if we wore something, and we were both pretty conservative about the things that we wore, but it would still have something, we would still have something said to us, well, you know, you're going to wear that because somebody will look at you, you know, things like that. So,
yeah. And I would, it would be a battle, but if I had to wear like a spaghetti strap dress that was short or whatever, I would manage to be able to put like a blue jean jacket on over it.
Yes.
And that helped some. But I just wanted to wear blue jeans and a t-shirt. I wanted to wear jogging pants and a t-shirt. I didn't want to be looking seductive all the time. I was just a teenage kid. And that dressing like that brought in and attracted older guys.
Mm-hmm.
And that just was humiliating to me. I looked older than what I was. I was forced to look older than what I was. And older men at that point in my life when I was 16, 17 years old and these people were 25, 30, 40 years old, that was just revolting to me.
Yes.
I was like, that was just disgusting.
And that's something else that was different because we had the one person in common that how do you put it?
We were forced to.
Yes, forced to do things with, and that tormented both of us. But you had different experiences as far as having to deal with the older people and older things like that. I did not have that. And so that's what we were talking about. Like, it knew the different things that worked in your brain versus what worked in my... I'm not saying that I would have liked older... I'm not saying that. But that just... We were at different points in our lives, different ages and everything. And so therefore, it knew what your triggers were.
And different builds.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
That was the issue for me. I felt like no one ever looked me in the face and talked to me.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it was just disgusting to me. I was a person. I wasn't a body.
Right. And you were talking about it actually with the, I guess going back to the isolation about you and I not being able to talk about anything, Mom not being able to talk about anything with us. And then you being told that you were fighting for somebody because they were losing strength to fight or didn't have the strength to fight anymore. And
it was attacking them too.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't anyone in our household. It was just some girl down the road.
And the summer that you said you were like, why are you in your room? Just being so depressed and, not coming out of your room and everything like that. And you were so upset. That was the summer, the 2 summers that everything really, really got bad for me. And I was staying in my room because I was to the point that it did not matter to me anymore. I did not care about life anymore. And it got to the point where I would look at Dad or I would look when this thing was here. And I was like, I don't care. Kill me. I don't want to do what you want me to do. I'm not going to do it. Kill me.
And I was the type that do whatever you want to me, but I'll protect other people. And I sort of kicked into that. I've got to protect this girl mode because she wants to kill herself is pretty much what I was told. Mm-hmm. And I had to be the strength for this person. Mm-hmm. But I didn't realize that the person that I was being the strength for was right across the kitchen in her bedroom.
Yes. Yeah.
But it didn't matter. I mean, I was fighting for some girl I didn't even know.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew what I was going through, and I didn't want someone else going through that.
And at that point, I didn't care.
And it was a lot of prayers. A lot of prayers. God, just give me the strength to not only fight for me, but to fight for whoever this poor girl is who wants to give up. Don't let her kill herself. Don't let her die. Don't let this thing destroy her. And that's what I would just keep praying. God, just show me what I need to do. How can I help this person? And I did not realize that the person lived in my house and was my little sister that I was already protecting, because by doing all this stuff, you weren't getting messed with.
Right.
According to whatever.
Yes.
So when I found out, I was very angry, but that's a different story.
Yes. So I think that's where we're going to end things with episode 3, talking about control, because that's what we've been talking about today, is how this being and Satan, or, controls people in these circumstances, in these situations, plays the mind games, isolates you from each other, from other people,
Put you in a constant state of fear.
Yes.
But I also don't want to give Satan the glory of thinking that he has all this power, because if God wasn't with us every step of the way, he would have won. And
we've had people say, how in the world did you make it through? And that's what we've said. God. There's no other way that we have made it through this.
When you're literally being choked out.
Yeah.
And it's being derogatory. Where's your God now?
Yes.
Right here. Right here.
And when you are terrified to go to bed, because you don't even want to pull the covers back on your bed.
You don't know what's in your bed.
Yeah, you're going to see, a hatchet laying there with a note that is written in, some different handwriting that is not
like bird scratch or something.
Yes.
It wasn't normal handwriting.
And tells you that you're going to die, on a regular basis. And, and so it just is, if it was not for God, and far from perfect, I'm not, I am not perfect by any means at all, but I try. And even now, I know that God is the reason that we've made it this far.
Yes.
Do we have PTSD? Do we have issues?
Yes.
Yes, we do. You can't go through everything that we did and not have issues. But all in all, some people might not agree, but I think we do okay considering what we've gone through.
I think,
but we still have that connection to God. Church and God is still very strong in our lives, and that's like the main thing in our lives,
Just my personality, the anger, the different things like that. Just within the last 10 years, I've noticed a huge difference between who I was 10 years ago and who I am now.
And it's funny because you have dealt with yours longer than I have. So I am now dealing with the anger and have had to start reaching out to get therapy and other ways to start dealing with the anger, because like we've said, you're at a different point than I am. And there's nothing, I'm not saying you're right, I'm wrong, whatever. It's just that we're at 2 different points in our lives with this and what's gone on.
Right.
And so, with the anger, like you said, you are getting past that. I'm working on it.
Right.
And it's just, I guess it's just strange because I'm not really an angry person in general, but then it doesn't take much to flip the switch. And then you're like, wait a minute, after it's all said and done, you're like, there wasn't a reason for that.
Right.
That was not the reason that I got mad. It's because I have built up anger.
Right.
And it just takes one little thing to flip that switch.
Right.
And so now I'm trying to get where you are and lean on God for one, but also figure out how to deal with this, because I repressed everything for so long. And so anyway, that's just the points that we're at right now also. And that's another reason that I think that this podcast is good for both of us. being able to talk about the things, and especially for me to be able to actually open up and start talking about things more than I ever probably would have.
And knowing that we're not the only ones in this world
Yes.
that's gone through this kind of stuff. And there may be someone who doesn't have anyone to talk to.
Right.
And the more you keep this kind of stuff in the darkness, instead of shedding light on it, the more power it gets.
Yes.
And the more down and broken you get or stay.
Right.
There's no healing without dealing with it. And if you don't have anyone to talk to, how are you going to heal and deal?
Yeah, exactly. And I have to say this, like I talked to you about this earlier, but you know, we say things about Dad, and he's not here to be able to say one way or the other about things. But in no way, shape, or form is this podcast meant to bring negative light to anybody. You know what I mean? It's not to down anybody. Yeah. And not anything like that. Things happened. This is the truth about what happened. And our family actually was able to talk about things before Dad passed, bring things out, and actually we were able to confront him, but then also know that there was, we know for sure that it wasn't always him, that there was definitely something demonic and something that
he had no control over.
Yes,
either.
And we know this. So, we're not trying to just put anybody on blast with this at all.
Right.
We're just trying to bring things to light, like you said.
Not to be accusatory, but educate.
Yes, absolutely.
That these are the techniques, these are the tactics that the enemy uses.
Yes.
To grab a hold, to maintain control.
Yes. Thank you all again for listening to us and for giving us feedback. We've had so many people several people who have actually messaged us back and told us, that they had no idea, or, they were surprised to hear our story and they were really wanting to hear the next episode. And we're trying to just not overwhelm everybody with every topic at one time. So that's why we're trying to break things down to where we can cover all of this, but at the same time, make it more understandable each week. And so anyway, like we said, if you have any questions or anything like that, just reach out to us at survivingdarknesspodcast@gmail.com, and we'll get that and we'll get back to you, and we will hopefully hear from you, and we'll have this up on Friday. Thank you, guys.